talk about the rediscovery of a fulling mill at a place called Barrowburn, and this slide is busier than I like, but it just shows all people that helped us with funding and help in kind to do this project. But principally, that was HLF and what was then English Heritage is now, I think David Attenborough changed the name. Where is Barrowburn? It's abroad. Go to Kelso, head south, over the Cheviots, over the Border Ridge, and Barrowburn is a farm about 3 or 4 miles south of the Border Ridge on the headwaters of the River Coquet. Coquet then flows east down through Rothbury and goes into the North Sea at Amble. So Barrowburn there is the black arrow at the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. That land in the 12th, 13th centuries was largely owned by a family called the Umphrevilles. They came over with or close to William the Conqueror and got big land grants. And from about 1180 onwards, they started first leasing and then giving the land to a Cistercian foundation in Morpeth, about 30 miles away. Why would they do that? Partly probably to build up brownie points in heaven, but partly probably a tax dodge. This was about 300 years before Christopher Columbus discovered Panamanian tax havens, so you had to do what you could, and giving the land to the church was one way of getting rid of taxes. Sorry, I'll get there in a minute. There we go. The monks were very good business people. They kept good records of all their transactions, and some have survived. And reading those transactions shows us that in a period we can date between 1226 and 1244, they reached agreement with the Umphrevilles, who still owned part of the land, about building a pond for a fulling mill on the Coquet. And without boring you with reading that out, that helped us tie down whereabouts on the Coquet that fulling mill was. It's about a 3/4 of a mile stretch. And starting in 2010, really can't see this thing. There we got it. What's a fulling mill? Most of you know, but those who don't, fulling is a process whereby you pound freshly woven cloth to tighten it up and remove grease and oil so you can dye it and tailor it. Ideally, you use warm water with Fuller's Earth. If you can't get Fuller's Earth, then you use substances like urine. Historically, this has been a physical process, and it's a photograph on the left of an early 20th century fulling process in Ireland. You can see the cloth moving from tub to tub as they trample on it. I always think these guys look a bit glum. If you spent your working life knee-deep in urine, you'd probably be glum too. Fortunately for that sort of work, mechanization appeared quite early on. 12th century, largely religious houses brought fulling mills into this country, whereby you used water power to raise and drop hammers and pound the cloth that way. Raised production, but traditional fullers would say it reduced quality. In 2010, we walked the river in that 3/4 of a mile stretch, and we located ultimately masonry and some timber sticking out of the bank. Wasn't clear initially what that was, but we raised some money, did some carbon-14 dates, and the timber was clearly medieval, and it was compatible, of an age compatible with the license that had been granted by the Umphrevilles to the monks. So that seemed to us to be a good basis on which to proceed, and we raised more money from HLF and so on, and went at it with a couple of spades. And working in the river, this is what we found. It's a medieval masonry wheel pit. It's about 5 meters long. The inside channel is about 50 centimeters wide. And as you'll see in the next couple of photographs, it's been robbed, but nevertheless, or damaged by floodwater, but nevertheless, there's enough of this to get a really good understanding of what this wheel pit looked like. It is fairly good sandstone, nicely tooled on all the front and upper faces, still not really tooled on the back faces at all. Looking at it in more detail, you can see on the right-hand side a curved entry point into the pit. And you can see also we found abrasions from the wheel, curved abrasions on both sides of the wheel pit, indicating where the wheel had rubbed against the side of the pit as it turned. Those two things, the curved entry point and those abrasions, allowed us to characterize the mill wheel, which of course was no longer there. We can work out the radius. top left. I won't bore you with the geometry. And it's sort of, I won't say it's a fairly standard mill wheel size, but it's about 12, 13 feet across, and that's not atypical. More interestingly, it was a low breast shot wheel. Again, without boring you with all the different ways in which you can configure mill wheels, this means the water hit the mill wheel between sort of 6 and 9 o'clock, if you imagine it's a clock face, and the wheel turned partly because of the impact of the water on the blades, and partly because the weight of the water being held in the channel turned the blades as well. This was interesting to us because before we did this dig, all the authorities said the earliest known breast shot wheel dated from the 16th century. This predates that by something like 300 years, so we were quite pleased to find that. We found more stuff around the pit, very eroded 13th century halfpenny, which we think came from Canterbury, can't really make that out for sure. As interestingly as the mill abrasions, we found other marks on the masonry. I'm going to walk now and point them out in case you can't see them. Diagonal scratches there, and diagonal scratches there. Some going down the face, the one at the end block goes around the corner of the face. We call these mason's marks. They're not the kind of traditional mason's marks that say who made this block. We think they are assembly instructions. We don't know where this stone was quarried, but we think that in the quarry, the mill pit was mocked up. Someone marked the stones as to where they should go. It was then disassembled, taken up the river and reassembled, and those marks were used as a guide to reassembly. It's kind of IKEA without the Allen key. Below the wheel pit, we found a wooden structure tight up against the end of the pit. And again, without boring you with all the details of the existing planks and stakes and mortises and dowel holes, we're fairly sure that this was a low-walled wooden enclosure, that the water coming out of the wheel pit ran through and out again. It had a wooden floor and it had low wooden walls. And it probably looked something like that. And our best guess, it was there to wash the cloth once it had been fulled, to get rid of all the nasty agents and things you'd be washing in it, so you could then stretch it out on tentering frames to dry in the sun, if there is any sun, and then tailor and make into cloth, cloth clothing. So we don't know if that's what it was for, but it seems like a reasonable guess. On the bank, over successive seasons, we opened up successively larger trenches, and this one shows sort of the trench probably at its largest. The most notable thing is this grey plastic tube running across it. That is post-medieval. Bless their hearts, British Telecom put a trench right through this site in the 1960s. Didn't know the mill was there. Fortunately, didn't do very much damage. But that tube contained communication links for the farms further up the valley. And something I want to mention before, this is a few feet away from the live firing area, the danger area of Otterburn Ranges. That also carries communication links for MOD. We were very careful not to put a spade through it. Did not want to start World War III. Several interesting things in this large trench. Two parallel walls. You can see one at the left, which you've actually taken out by this time the photograph is taken, one at the right. They're a long way apart. They are 8 meters apart. They're pretty low quality, so almost certainly not walls of a building. It's possible that they were there as perimeter walls just to protect the working area and keep stock from trampling and trespassing into it. You do not want your sheep pre-fooled before you actually clip them. We found a paved area with artifacts on it, very nice over the first penny, much better condition than the half penny we found in the wheel pit. Probably dropped pretty much when it was new, so someone's probably still looking for that. Nice key, don't know where it came from, probably not associated with the mill, probably just somebody dropped it. And a lot of medieval pottery. All over the site, reasonable amount of medieval pottery, very little post-medieval stuff. So nothing much went on here after the medieval period. A couple of converging drains. When we first found these, we thought maybe just field drains, although what they'd be draining there, we don't really know. But the fact they're converging on what turned out to be the working area of the mill indicates to us they were there to deliver low-volume water supply into the working area. And the picture on the right is much later. It's a 17th century picture of a fulling mill done by a man called Vittorio Zonca, and that shows almost exactly the same thing. At the red arrow, there's a little trickle of water coming into the working area, presumably to keep the cloth moist and wet while it was being fulled. And we think probably those drains fulfill the same purpose there. I'm getting better at finding the next slide. Finally, the working area of the mill is in the centre of the top picture, and taken from the other side, you've got this rather low quality but slightly battered revetted area. The orange dotted line shows where the wheel shaft would have come ashore, as it were, and almost certainly because of the way that revetment is shaped, the fulling machinery would have been downstream from that to the right in the picture. There's a fair amount of charcoal around there. You can see sort of dark marks on the ground. Whether that was because someone came in later and burnt things, or whether that was a process associated with the fulling itself, i.e. keeping water warm with little fires, we don't know. But the charcoal dates to the right sort of time for the mill being active or immediately afterwards. We'd hoped to find a nice mill building. We didn't. It could have been that the mill building was stone and completely robbed. No sign of that. It could have been a lighter weight building with wooden posts and lightweight roofs, as shown in the picture there, which is a reconstruction of a different fulling mill. But we found no post holes, nothing like that at all. So there's a real possibility that there was no building. Fulling is not a process like corn milling, where you've got to keep the product dry. It doesn't matter if the stuff gets wet. It's going to get wet anyway. So there are pictures of later fulling mills built out in the open air. And to be honest, if you're a nice abbot down in your cosy monastery in Morpeth, 30 miles away, do you care if your fulling guys get wet? No, not really. You don't care. We don't know what the machinery looked like. There is no known drawing of medieval fulling machinery. This is done by a man called Jose Torriano. It's about 1540, 1550. It's one of the earliest known pictures of fulling machinery. You can see it's extremely lightweight. Just a water coming in on the right, turning thing. In this case, the hammers are going horizontally rather than up and down. But it's a very lightweight structure and could certainly be moved and taken away if and when that was appropriate. Why would it be taken away? It always strikes me, it looks as if these guys are playing polo. They're not. It's a lot more vicious. This is the Anglo-Scottish troubles that started in around 1296. And if you remember 1970s trade union discussions, 300 years of full and frank discussions. The English attacked the Scots attacked the English. We know the English attacked the English. Probably the Scots attacked the Scots. It was an excuse for a really good bust-up. It lasted a very long time. We have no records of the mill being abandoned, but we do have records of other estates in the area becoming worthless, being exempted from taxes in the early 14th century. The last record of the abbey being active in this area with a farm is about 1307. So our suggestion is that fairly soon afterwards, a capital-intensive project like the mill became unattractive and the monks just walked away from it, maybe taking the machinery with them to use elsewhere. So the mill site has never been redeveloped. And that's why it's important. Very few mill sites have been found and dug and medieval stuff located. Partly because if you find a good mill site, you redevelop it every 50, every 100 years, you replace the old stuff. So this is a very rare survival. It has been robbed, but there's enough there to work out what was going on. High quality masonry pit, probably built by the same people that built the abbey down in Morpeth. It's the earliest breastshot wheel, certainly in the country in modern times. There's one known Roman one in France, but other than that, there's nothing else in Europe. And I don't have time today, unless you want to stay for a lot longer, but it's given us an important insight into the local economy, the numbers of people living there, the work they did, and some indications of why the Morpeth Monastery would put a fulling mill this far away from their home territory. Thank you very much.